You were told that more income would buy freedom, but somehow it brought pressure instead. Now your salary is higher, but so is your stress. Your expenses feel heavier, and your peace of mind thinner. Here's the uncomfortable truth. It's not your income that changed your life. It's the invisible system that came with it. In this video, you'll understand why earning more can quietly increase stress, how lifestyle creep turns into invisible obligations, and how to rebuild a system that gives you control back without relying on discipline. You think your stress increased slowly, but it didn't. It happened the moment your income crossed a new threshold. Because right after a raise, something subtle happens. You don't celebrate the number. You renegotiate your identity. People at my level don't live like that anymore. That's the knowledge gap. You believe you're upgrading your life, but you're actually upgrading your baseline, and that creates tension. Because every upgrade, better apartment, frequent dining, upgraded gadgets, feels optional in the moment, but becomes expected over time. Optional becomes normal. Normal becomes necessary. And now your life isn't flexible anymore. It's structured around maintaining a standard. That's the shift. More income didn't reduce your problems. It replaced visible struggle with invisible pressure. You're no longer worried about survival. You're worried about sustainability. And that's harder to see, but heavier to carry. But this is just the surface. Because the real pressure isn't coming from what you buy. It's coming from what your life now demands from you.
Here's what most people miss. Your lifestyle doesn't just cost money, it costs mental bandwidth. That's the hidden layer. Because every upgrade adds something invisible. More decisions, more maintenance, more expectations. A bigger house isn't just rent or EMI, it's upkeep, social comparison, standards you feel obligated to maintain. A higher paying job isn't just income, it's longer hours, higher stakes, less margin for error. And now the tension builds, because your financial life looks stable on the outside, but internally it feels like a system that can't slow down. You're earning more, but you've also reduced your ability to pause. That's the trap. You've created a life where stopping, even briefly, feels risky. So you keep going, not because you want to, but because your system requires it. The payoff? Stress isn't coming from lack anymore. It's coming from maintenance pressure. And if you don't recognize this, you'll keep trying to fix it with budgeting, which doesn't solve the real issue. Because the real issue isn't spending, it's structure. And that leads to the next layer most people never question.
Let's make this a little uncomfortable. A part of your spending isn't about you. It's about how your life is perceived. That's the gap. Because as income increases, your environment changes. Different colleagues, different conversations, different standards. And slowly, without noticing, you start performing. Not in an obvious way, but in subtle, consistent choices. You say yes to things you don't fully value. You upgrade things you didn't plan to. You maintain a lifestyle that aligns with your circle. That creates tension. Because now your spending isn't just functional, it's social. And social spending is dangerous because it doesn't feel optional. It feels necessary to belong. So even if you could spend less, you don't. Because the cost isn't just financial, it's psychological. The payoff? You're not just managing money anymore. You're managing perception. And that's exhausting. But here's where it gets deeper. Because even if you recognize this pattern, you still feel stuck. Why? Because your entire system is now built around continuing this cycle.
You're not failing financially. That's the problem. You're functioning. You're paying bills, saving a little, growing your career. Everything looks fine. But internally, it feels tight. That's the knowledge gap. Because traditional financial advice is designed for people in crisis. But you're not in crisis. You're in a high-functioning trap. And that creates tension. Because nothing feels broken enough to fix, but nothing feels relaxed enough to enjoy. You're constantly optimizing, cutting small costs, tracking numbers, trying to stay in control. But the system itself is what's creating the pressure. The payoff? You don't need better discipline. You need fewer decisions. Because stress doesn't come from lack of control. It comes from too much manual control. So the shift isn't spend less. It's design a system that makes decisions for you. Automatic savings, predefined lifestyle caps, clear boundaries on upgrades. Not restrictive, just intentional. Because the goal isn't to shrink your life, it's to make it sustainable. But there's one final piece most people overlook, and it determines whether you actually escape this trap or just manage it better.
Here's the deeper truth. You don't rise to your income. You rise to your identity around money. That's the gap. Because if your identity says more income equals better lifestyle, then every increase will come with new pressure. But if your identity shifts to more income equals more control, everything changes. That creates tension, because now you have to go against default behavior. You might earn more, but choose not to upgrade everything. You might have access, but choose not to use it all. And that can feel uncomfortable at first, because it breaks the pattern. But here's the payoff. You start separating earning from consuming, and that's where freedom actually begins. Because now your income grows, but your obligations don't grow at the same pace. That gap? That's where peace lives. You're no longer chasing a lifestyle. You're building a system that supports your life. And once that clicks, you stop asking, can I afford this? And start asking, do I want my life to require this? That's a different level of clarity, and it changes everything.
Most people think escaping this trap means earning even more. But that's not the real question. The real question is, what kind of life is your income building? Because if you don't define that intentionally, your environment will define it for you. And the risk isn't obvious failure. It's quite exhausting. The kind that looks successful, but doesn't feel sustainable. The shift is simple, but not easy. Stop upgrading your lifestyle automatically. Start upgrading your systems intentionally. Because freedom isn't about how much you earn. It's about how much your life demands from you. And in the next video, we are going to discuss the illusion of progress, why your bank balance feels like it is shrinking, so you understand better what is failing you constantly.